to today's collective worship, and it's the 1st of March today, which is the beginning of spring, and that means there's just 1 week until all the school is back together. Next Monday, hopefully, everybody will begin rushing through the gates at their correct time, of course, and we'll all be back as one whole school. So welcome this morning. I'd like you to join with me to as we celebrate the good news of Jesus Christ. Thanks be to God. Okay, so today's theme of our collective worship is looking at fairness and how things are fair in the world. I wonder if you've said recently or heard recently somebody saying, "It's not fair." Now, as many of you know, I am very, very lucky that my 2 grandchildren live at my house. And this weekend, wow, we were out in the garden lots of the weekend, like many of you were. And the amount of times I heard, "It's not fair, Nanny. Nanny, it's not fair. She's got the racket, or she's got the ball, or I want to go on the swing, she won't let me." All the time. So I was playing referee most of the weekend for "It's not fair." But today we're going to look at things about fairness. Have you ever thought about the fast runner who doesn't always win the race? I wonder if they stand there when they've been beaten and they say, "Well, that's not fair." Or the smart man who doesn't always become wealthy, and the man with special skills who doesn't always receive the praise. That's something I think that a lot of children, especially in school, think about, is "it's not fair," is when we do the collective worship on a Friday and the celebration worship. I think sometimes, you've done a really, really good piece of work, or you've been really proud of a piece of work that you've done, and you wait for Friday and you don't necessarily get mentioned or a certificate, and sometimes maybe that's where you can sometimes feel it's not fair. And I can understand that, as we all try our best and we all try our hardest at the best, each time. So I'm going to read a story today about 2 brothers. Now, this is a not fair one, but it's the opposite way around. It's a much more positive spin on it, something not being fair. There were once 2 brothers who farmed together. They shared equally in all the work and split the profits exactly the same and equally. They each had their own barn. One of the brothers was married and he had a large family. The other brother was single. One day, the single brother thought to himself, "It's not fair that we divide the grain evenly. My brother has many mouths to feed, but I only have one. I know what I'll do. I'll take a sack of grain from my barn each evening and put it into my brother's barn." So that night, when it was dark, he carefully carried a sack of grain across the field and put it into his brother's barn. Now, the married brother, he thought to himself, "It's not fair we just divide the grain evenly. I have many children to take care of for me in my old age, but my brother has none. I know what I'll do. I'll take a sack of grain from my barn each evening and put it into my brother's barn." So that night, when it was dark, he carefully carried a sack of grain across the field and put it into his brother's barn. The next morning, the 2 brothers were amazed to discover that although they'd each removed a sack of grain the night before, they still had the same amount left. That night, the same thing happened again. The single brother took a sack of grain from his barn and put into his brother's barn, and the married brother took a sack of grain from his barn and put it into his brother's barn. This carried on for several nights. One night the moon was shining brightly and both brothers set off at the same time. Halfway across the field, guess what happened? Well, they bumped into each other, didn't they? They stopped. They looked at each other and saw each other's sack of grain on the other brother's back, and suddenly understood the mystery of their ever full barns. The brothers smiled and gave each other a high five, because they were filled with deep love for one another. Now, legend said that God looked down from heaven and saw the 2 brothers embracing and said, I declare this to be a holy place, for I have witnessed extraordinary love here. So there you can see that's something where it wasn't that each of the brothers didn't think something was fair, but not in a selfish way, in a really positive way. So today's thought for you to reflect on is there any way that you could think of and act in ways that are fairer to those around you? How can you show others about fairness? Jesus summed it up by saying, "Do to others what you would have them do to you." I wonder how it would make a fairer world if we all followed this simple rule. Now, you'd like to join with me in the prayer. Dear God, at times when the world does not feel like a fair place, help me to trust in you and know that you're alongside me, showing me how to respond and how to treat others fairly. And I think that's what we all want, really, isn't it? Is to be treated fairly, or to feel we're being treated fairly. I know sometimes children say, "Oh, it's not fair about football, especially out on the playground. Someone's taken the ball for a longer period of time, or they've picked it up and run with it all the way across the playground." I've seen that quite a few times. That always strikes me as quite funny, that it's not really very fair for everybody else. So maybe today when you're out at play, you can think of ways to share and to be fair with all your friends out on the playground. Right, thank you all very much for joining me today. I'm going to end there, and we take the good news into our world. Let us go in peace. Thank you. There we go. I stopped the recording. So